Greetings all, welcome to the Powerhouse Perspective, empowering leaders for business breakthroughs. For those of you who have not joined us before, I am Scott Medeiros, the president of Helmwise, and this is Chandler Rose, the CEO of the Rosewood Family of Companies. If you've been following the Powerhouse Perspective, you'll know that in the last session, we talked a lot about AI, specifically some of the risks and concerns around AI. So today is going to be the second piece of that conversation, sort of the other side of the coin. We're going to talk today about the positive aspects of AI, or how some of the risks and some of the concerns that we had in the last podcast actually can be mitigated through a good strategy in using the AI tool. Now, what you don't know is Mr. Rose here has been doing a lot of work with AI. He's been doing some AI training. He's been talking to a lot of people who are really on the forefront of AI technology. So we are blessed to have Chandler here because, frankly, there's probably not another person I know who knows as much about AI when it comes to the business aspects to it, how to apply it, how to discern some of the challenges and issues. And so, Chandler, it's great to have you here today. I think this discussion around how we can take the positives and mitigate some of the challenges of AI are going to be important to all of our listeners or those who may be watching us as well. The Helmwise cohort isn't a conference. It's not a seminar, and it's definitely not for everyone. The Helmwise cohort is a private gathering for a curated group of senior leaders, enterprise captains who value wisdom over hype and clarity over noise. Held at a coastal retreat in North Carolina, this all-inclusive 3-day experience offers confidential conversations, deep insight, and rare access to a seasoned community. For more information, please visit helmwise.com/cohorts.
Yeah, I want to, before we jump in, I do want to be clear the area I've kind of tried to focus and learn and understand AI is at the kind of highest level, the strategic, what is the actual structure and the use of AI going to do for business decisions, really relationship, personal development, all kinds of ways that's going to impact you as an individual, you as a leader, and potentially at organizational level. I'm by no means an expert when you get down into actually building
Correct.
the AIs. More how do they relate, what are the potential impacts on organizations and decisions, and how you want to structure business and decisions going forward. I've spent most of my time trying to understand and get a good idea of how that's going to impact decisions on what's good. How do you define good? What's fair?
Correct.
What can you trust? What's truth? How's it going to impact jobs and leadership and structures of management and things like that? So I'm spending much more of my time at that level than down in the details. Quite a bit on the types of models, the areas that they're trying to solve issues, and then as they evolve and as they solve or connect things together, how that will again impact and shift what we consider foundational and traditional. Certainly the bedrock ideas are, we'll separate the wheat from the chaff. We'll figure out real quick which ones are real foundational and which ones were kind of a fad or across time, and then how much they built upon each other versus some newfangled idea, which are positives of AI, which we'll talk about here as we get into it. But Scott, you can jump us right in if you want and start knocking them down.
Well, I'm going to knock them down here in a minute, but one of the things I wanted to emphasize as well, Chandler, I think it's most impressive about what you're doing. So here you are, CEO of the Rosewood Family of Companies, and you've gotten your hands dirty into AI. You're constantly into each of the large language models, using one against the other, really understanding the information that's provided, how that's going to potentially give risk to the strategic aspects that you talked about. So I think that's a great blend between not just the theory, but the practical experience you have with the tools that I think are to be most valuable to our audience. Now, Chandler's done a great job of going back to what we talked about before, which were some of the concerns. And now we have a document here to kind of guide us in our conversation today to make sure that we're covering those concerns and how to mitigate them. So one of the things that we talked about last time, Chandler, was the fact that AI is going to start truncating knowledge. And this was a concern of mine because in the old days, and it seems that it's the old days, but probably just a couple of months ago, we were using Google pretty heavily. And the thing about Google is we could put a search term in there and Google would come back with a series of websites. And then we would have to go to each of those websites to pull the information, bring it all together, and discern what was important to us. AI is now doing that for us. We put something into AI, it's going out and looking at all those sources, kind of culling it or curating it and feeding us back. But what we don't have is the ability to look at the source material. So how can we at least think about this truncation of knowledge and get AI to serve us in a manner that is not going to jeopardize the quality of the information?
Yeah, certainly how you set up your AI is important in the beginning. So you can ask it to give you feedback and give you all the places that it generated its response from, which is helpful. We mentioned kind of what gets brought into the decision process. Really to truly vet one model, I think is about impossible. I think most of the people, if you go read it, use multiple models against each other is your best bet. So there, of course, is some level, I don't want to use the word bias, I want to be careful. There is the way that each group has built their large language model that will impact how it returns a response. And so if there are errors or preferences in there, you can try to test it by asking it questions, which will give you quite a bit of information, but it is much easier to go over to Anthropic to, run into Gemini and play them against each other. So, hey, here's a summary of what I got out of ChatGPT. Drop it into one of the other models. Do you find this, a good summary? What's missing? What should be included? What are some potential errors, some bias that might have been in here? And you can start playing them against each other. So certainly a multi-source AI is going to be the first line of defense, I would say, for sure. And then simplify is probably step two. So the bigger the question, the bigger the prompt, I would say try your best to break that down, because just like asking, if this is management and you're a leader in management, the bigger the instruction you give out, the more room there is for interpretation and error. And so just try to break that down. And so those three are really kind of personalize it, play them against each other, break your actual question and what you're trying to solve down. Are probably three things that I would do to try to get a better answer.
And I think the part you just mentioned, I don't believe, I could be wrong, but I don't believe a lot of people are using multiple AI tools. I think someone gets on ChatGPT, maybe they pay for the pro version or the plus version, and they're using that tool as their AI tool. And the point you just mentioned about it's important that you use other tools, that it's not just ChatGPT, but it's ChatGPT and maybe Gemini or maybe Copilot and maybe Anthropic or Perplexity or maybe Grok, and to use those because each has their strengths and weaknesses. And I think that we are limiting ourselves and actually increasing the risk if we stay with a single tool. So your mention about taking something, a response that you got from ChatGPT and feeding that into Perplexity, for example, may give you a different outcome, and it may serve as a validating point, or it may determine some areas of gaps. And so we can't be single-threaded.
No.
Just like we should, as a good C-suite, you should be bringing in a diverse set of opinions. We've got to think the same way in terms of AI. I think that's a huge learning for me, and I assume for our audience as well.
Yeah, and your one model point brings us right to number 2 on this list, which is loss of human reasoning. And so, the top models are getting very good. The newest models are getting very good, especially ChatGPT is I would say, to me at least, the most friendly interface, the easiest to kind of have a conversation with and work through a problem. And so combined, if you're going to one source and the fact that you believe it without contesting it potentially, and you stop using your brain to think. And so loss of reasoning, critical thinking, MIT study we mentioned last podcast, it shows how much of the brain is not activated using AI. And so there's several ways to mitigate that. I don't know if, Scott, you want to jump into a couple we had on there, but there's some positives of being able to offload a lot of tasks onto AI, and then there's some mitigations that are kind of out there to help protect against it. So what do you think of the idea that people are basically going to turn into reading their nav aid, whether that's Waze or whatever it is, and don't even know how they arrived?
Not validating. Following the GPS right into the water.
Yep.
Scenario. I think when it comes to this human reasoning aspect, I don't think we should abdicate that responsibility purely to the AI tool. I think we should use it as a tool, as a thought partner, and in some cases almost have a dialogue with it, right? Mm-hmm. Ask it certain question, ask it to validate its response. Tell me your rationale, or what am I not thinking about? And use it more as a thought partner in a back and forth discussion standpoint, instead of saying, here's all my information, give me the output, and then I'm done. You've got to query it, you've got to challenge it, you've got to get this going, because by doing so, that keeps your thought process moving along. If you just take the output and don't ask it any questions to validate or to give it more context, then you are indeed just giving up your ability to reason. And so I think by using the tool as a dialogue is probably the best way to keep the reasoning going, because you can't have a dialogue and you're still thinking about the questions.
And by reasoning, what Scott's getting at is there is an option. Certainly there are offloading just mundane kind of, I need an answer and I need to move forward task. But when you're truly working through a problem, working through a solution, or you should be working through it, let me rephrase, because you may just let the AI do it, which is an issue. There is an option to personalize or ask the AI to literally act as a thought partner. So when Scott says use it as a thought partner, you can go in and ask it in your personalization, hey, use the Socratic method. We're going to have questions back and forth in order to engage you in thinking. Like, hey, have you thought of this? And why are you looking at that question? And what are you trying to solve?
Right.
And so kind of you can go through the, any questioning model you like. There is another piece as well, is if you view it as not only a thought partner, but you are both working together to solve. So you don't want it just to question you, hey, have I thought about this? Or what do you think about that? It does a pretty good job of drawing in, hey, what are areas I didn't consider that may be related to this topic? You can go back and forth. And so that's just intentionality. And so you're going to have to be aware of when you get too reliant on the autopilot button, as opposed to, I need to think. Another area which led in from the first example was, if you're constantly thinking where it may be making an error and you're asking it for other perspectives and taking it into other models, you're already engaging way more than input, output. If it's input and output, you're very susceptible to loss of reasoning and just moving on autopilot, which is kind of a natural tendency. So intentionality is going to be important.
And one of the things I think you've done, and I tried it and failed, so I'm going to get both some learning as well as some advice from you, is actually speaking to the AI, not typing in responses, but actually speaking. So almost like having a conversation with AI. I think you've used there's a voice function that allows you to actually speak versus type in a chat. So tell us about how that's worked out for you. Is it conversational, or is it just a pipe dream at this point?
Well, I think we've been preconditioned, obviously, through Google and the people, over the last 20 years to literally put in a query, a question, and expect a response. And so not only are you getting different parts of your brain activated by speaking, which actually generally, I won't get into the nerdy part of that, will shut off more parts of your brain. So you have to be careful how that conversation goes. Because when you have to take thought, put it into typed text, you're actually using a little bit more of your brain. And so you have the option to type it in and get a direct response. You have the option to speak to it in order to get a direct response. And then you have the option of asking it to have conversation. And then I would go a further level of, when we talk a Socratic method or dialogos, which is kind of two people come together, think of it as scaffolding building to get better answers. So it's not one direction back, here's an answer. It's one direction back, you get part of the way there, and then you want the question, so you build another layer, another layer, another layer. You get closer to what is hopefully a better solution or a more accurate plan or whatever it may be, increase the chances you'll reach your destination or your goal, you must again intentionally ask any AI model to start interacting with you in that manner. If you do that, at least the theories when I went and used AI to do a lot of the data, what it could find from doing some deep research, comparing the brain activity where if you just give question response, which is shutting down a lot of your brain, versus if you truly used a Socratic method or a mutually building dialogue, kind of what we call dialogos, it should increase actually your brain activity compared to normal. But that's intentional, and you can't do it on all things. So you're not going to want to do that at what year was Ben Franklin born? Right. Just tell me the answer. Correct. And tell me a brief biography about it.
Correct.
Now, if you want to start learning from the history of Ben Franklin, that's when you would want to switch to this needs to be engaging, needs to be conversational. And so I think that's where you have to intentionally move into telling the AI how you want to interact as opposed to just getting answers. But conversation is good. It is a lot easier on time, to be honest. So it will take that conversation. When you have you talk back and forth, there's a record, of course, when you go back into your, whether it's ChatGPT, and go back and look at the responses that you can then utilize for a business to potentially create a memo, an idea, start building out an actual plan that's actionable.
So that scaffolding that you were talking about, that is completely possible with AI.
Yes.
Through this dialogue, the dialogos that you spoke of. So in the first context, the good takeaway was the fact that use multiple tools. And now we're saying use the tool not as a question response, but use it to try to scaffolding up to get to a better answer. And so that's another great advantage of AI.
It is. Now there's areas AI doesn't have any business. And so that will actually be probability, history, planning, and things like that. AI is not that good at. Context of, culture, will this be accepted in your, office, whatever the group you're trying to deploy this plan. AI can pull data, so it could give you Cialdini's influence kind of answers, but it won't tell you where you're at now. And so say you've had a bunch of layoffs, business is slow. You don't want to bring the same plan in the same manner to that situation as, we're pretty running along fine, or we're in a huge growth curve. Mm-hmm. The way you deploy a plan, even if it's the correct plan, is dramatically different. And AI does not do a good job in that regard. And so it's nuanced, but it has limitations. It's pulling history, likelihood, things that are kind of factual, things that may be related. Mm-hmm. Careful what we call intelligence versus wisdom. Really, what I would say is it doesn't have wisdom. It can give you a lot of intelligence. But.
Right. Well, that kind of goes to the next item on our list here, and something we talked about in the previous podcast is, can we trust the information that AI is providing us? And so there are techniques that you can use to try to get closer to, quote unquote, the truth. So what has been your experience in that area?
This gets into a harder area, which we'll cover a little bit of systems thinking, but again, ask the AI to assume the identity of more of a systems thinker and get it to question you back. So yes, that's the best financial decision, but how will that look in the marketplace? How will that work with your employees? How will that work 5 years from now? Has it been tried in the past? It can ask you questions to trigger you to think that way. Asking it to think that way, it'll give a response, but this is where it is certainly being creative, generative, and I would be careful what I followed from that regard. Another way is to tie it again to people that you have some trust in. And so we've covered a lot of authors here, business people that Scott respects and I respect. Hey, answer it as if you're Jim Collins and show me the references, because Scott's seen that the references, the interpretations may not be correct.
Correct.
And so, how would Jim Collins deploy this? And give me the books and the pages. Do check behind them, because AI takes quite a bit of liberties in actually giving you factually what they would say. We're all interpreting, but you can explain a little bit how it sounds brilliant. Sounds like it came from Maxwell,
Yes, it's
but
true.
not really. So.
Yeah, it's true. I've found responses having an intimate knowledge of the information that it is drawing its data from. AI has a great ability to make things sound very, very credible. The way that it reads is very easy to read, especially if you're giving it some parameters. Say, I want this at a high school level. I want this at a graduate level. The way it structures its sentences, the word that it uses, it flows very, very nicely. But sometimes when you start getting into the nuance of really what is it saying, it starts to deviate from the source material. And I only know that because I know the source material. If I didn't know the source material, I could be swayed by how well it reads. This sounds like a fantastic response. Sounds like I'm very educated. It sounds like I'm very learned in the response that it's providing, and it's going to put me in a very credible way. Until you meet a person like myself who understands that, and you present that response, and I go, you're off base. But the only way you know that is by being intimate with the source material, which is a bit of a catch-22. Because if we want to use AI truly as a thought partner, we have to trust that the information that it's getting or giving to us as part of this dialogue is indeed accurate, factual, or at least has a high probability of being aligned with the true source material. Otherwise, how are you saving time? If I have to go read all the things that AI is using as its source material and then discern whether or not the information now it's giving me is accurate, that's not saving me any time. And so I have found that even when I've used AI and asked it to provide the source material, I very rarely go to any of those links. Right? So it's almost as if the fact that it gave me the source material, I'm kind of almost automatically giving it credit, which to me is a danger.
Foolish fortress.
Foolish fortress. There you go.
Like, but this goes back to the earlier point. Have you take that info, drop it in a completely different model, tell me if this is accurate or not. And so the positive is you could run 3 or 4 models way faster than you could go reference check all of that information.
Yes.
And so you are still moving at a pace that is multiple times faster. I think that just where those edges are important, and then how it interacts with you so you don't shut down your reasoning and your ability to question and interpret, and then having enough base knowledge, so intentionality we bring up, but a kind of a planned structure of how you're going to deal with AI. If you go into it as you're just going to speak to it and it's going to be an oracle that gives you the answer, it will give you an answer and it'll sound great. So the positive is it'll give you lots of good answers. The other positive is use a lot of models to make sure that that answer is somewhat correct. And so that's one of the big things.
And that's a huge takeaway, right? Because if indeed we want to be more confident that the information that the AI is providing us, we can trust, then the best way to do that is take the output and put it into a different model. Not stay in the same model, because it's going to be using the memory, it's going to be using the prior conversation, it's going to start to manipulate to try to tell you what you want to hear, make you feel good, right? Unless you've given it instructions not to, which again is another technical aspect of the tool. So if not only is it a good idea to use multiple tools for multiple perspectives, it's also using multiple tools gives you greater confidence in the information that you provide.
Absolutely. And then, moving to another one of our risk and concerns from the last podcast was fox guarding the hen house.
Yeah.
And so what we mean by that again was we are using, especially if you're using just one and you build your whole ecosystem around one, all the data you're putting in, even in a private one, the AI gets smarter by seeing real world example, real world ties and facts and how things correlate. And so they want that data, they being both the corporation and the AI itself, which is programmed to continue to get better, to try to make less errors. So it wants to see real life scenarios and train off of real data. The same group who wants it again is the one telling you they'll protect it. And so, doesn't mean they're doing that, but developing your thought process behind the firewall. So maybe your AI, your core is behind the firewall going out to these multiple LLMs. So we're getting much more technical, but if you're trying to deploy it in your business or even for your personal AI version of you, be aware that not the best idea in the world, and maybe some of the models that, yes, that company that holds your personal GPT or LLM or however you set up, Scott's doppelganger, that company could potentially scrape some info, but I do feel like that's less likely if that is housed behind a firewall going out and hitting Gemini, hitting ChatGPT, hitting,
Correct.
Name whatever model you like to go to. Grok is probably number 2 for me, and bringing it back. And so you got that section off a little bit. And so that's one way to do it. Another way certainly is one you can talk about, is kind of multiple agents to watch. So if you've built out a system where you're using AI to do something, I've kind of looked at it as a colony of
Yes.
agents.
Yes.
So you're not sending one thing. So in your mind, if you're thinking I don't know, to me, the best thing is a cartoon or a video game. So an agent is just a character in one of those, and it's doing a job for you. So that character is doing something for you. Best thing you can do is build a colony of characters that are checking each other's work and doing smaller tasks in order to try to hold each character accountable. And then when it starts to aggregate to something more usable, it's checking itself. And so what is your kind of summary of what a kind of a colony approach? So you're behind the firewall.
I love the colony approach. It almost goes into my military background by layers of command, because it's a very, very powerful tool, and we want to try to offload as much of the mental bandwidth as necessary to the tool without losing our ability to think. But that multi-agent system, the MAS system, where you got a series of AI agents doing things for you, and then above that you put a supervisory layer that's actually checking, the agent's checking the other agents, and then you build that into it. Because by doing that, now you're starting to get, again, weeding out hallucinations, getting a better accuracy. Some of that may be something you're going to take and put to a different tool. So I am a big advocate of your colony approach. I think that is only going to increase my confidence in what the tool is providing to me. If it's a single agent providing me a single output without any supervisory layers over it, human and or technical, I'm probably not going to trust it. But if I indeed have built the structure and the rules and the instructions that are governing that administration, then an orchestration, then I'm going to be much more confident in its output.
Yeah, and as we think about that, boosting the confidence, creating some security layer, creating agents that actually can watch and see if one of the other ones trying to come downstream and gather info behind your firewall, gets way technical, even beyond my knowledge, just talking structure-wise in your head. You move into the idea of theft of ideas, so IP and logic theft.
Yes.
And so we have it trying to take your history and learn from what you have in your data, but you also have it trying to extract and correlate what you looked at in order to make a decision, or how you deployed information in order to move towards a goal. It's looking at logic and reasoning, and it does an amazing job. And so that's scary on one sense, but it is hugely beneficial in the other sense. So we kind of have one category similar that sounds scary if it goes the wrong direction, but again, the positive side of it is swarm learning. And so if you think of, I don't want to pick on one company, but you deploy one major model that has an AI overarching everything. Whoever owns that one major model is able to extract how you utilize all the tools. We covered that last part. And they can see, hey, this company is in pharmaceuticals. They mainly use these type things, and it's improving their own products, and it's potentially improving products it sells to other people, or giving access to other people. So that's one problem. The positive side of swarms is if you deploy a bunch of agents, and the way they're working in robots is probably the best way to learn about swarm learning. You could have micro learnings all aggregating together under an AI that you have. And so that sounds super technical, but can you give kind of your understanding of the speed of swarm learning?
Swarm learning. It's not an area that I know a lot about. I mean, I understand the concept, but
You understand the scary part.
yeah.
And so why that can be positive is interesting. But.
Yes, but you're right. From a technological standpoint, the more things that you can bring to bear on anything, you're going to increase the speed at which you're going to get an answer out. At the same time, you also need to have something that is aggregating or orchestrating all of those swarms. Otherwise, you've got a bunch of bees going around, but where is the control to any of that? So for me, bringing a lot of resources to bear to handle a lot of complicated things and get to an answer quickly makes a lot of sense to me. But what I do have a concern is how do you control the swarm?
Yeah, and for swarms, the robotics is the easiest way to think about it. Again, you can think of a robot, or you can think of a character in a cartoon or a video game. Essentially, if there's 1,000 robots deployed and they are connected enough, and one of the robots makes a mistake, knocks over a drink, whatever, that information relays back to the center, and the 999 other robots instantly learn what led to that mistake. And so if you think about that, it's not Scott and I learning, is Scott and I plus 998 other versions of us, and it's aggregating learning from all of it. And so you multiply the speed of learning dramatically, which, in business could be hugely beneficial.
Right.
It seems scary, but if you think of efficiency and automation, testing out scenarios, faster strategy iteration, it's pulling tons of examples and use cases that are actually being deployed, maybe in different areas of your company. The other thing is it aggregates info for small players and opens up markets to new entrants in the marketplace. And so you think of the legacy and amount of knowledge. It used to be this way in law. When I graduated law years ago, before they even had LexisNexis and Westlaw, law libraries were actually one of the most important things. So if you didn't live near a big law school, and you didn't have physical paper to go look at constantly updated case law, or name whatever area of law you're looking at, you were at a huge disadvantage. So obviously large law firms had law libraries within their law firm. So they would aggregate in cities, so they're around law school libraries, and they had their own internal systems.
Right.
Once that became democratized somewhat and went to the cloud, small firms could then pay and get access to the same amount of legal data. This is also allowing upstart with a phone to ask complicated Lean Six Sigma questions of an AI and get an answer. Right. So in one sense, that's hugely beneficial. So to me, I see some positives there for sure.
Well, there's some definitely positives. I mean, think about how quickly you can get to market now, where before it would take a lot of research into the demographics, the marketing, whether or not this particular product or service would be attractive. You can now do A/B testing inside of AI. You can define your avatar and say, okay, test this marketing campaign against this avatar and see what the potential response would be. And so that is so much faster. And so I think there's going to be, and I think you've even mentioned that there's firms out there that talk about platforming new businesses. Getting from an idea to a business is going to be accelerated dramatically because of AI, because they can put all those little pieces in there and says, okay, if you do all these things, boom, you're a business now, and you're on par with someone who's been in business for the past 5 years.
Yeah, and if you watch most of the good podcasters that are kind of in the front, I mean, the positive is you have access very quickly. The negative is legacy businesses lose what they call their moat, so their competitive advantage.
Right.
And so it is both positive and negative. I think that globally it is also very positive, because countries that don't have access to business schools, to business leaders, to conferences, if they have a phone and it has AI, they can get world-class advice. It may not be perfect, but it is 1,000,000 times more than what they had. And so that you're starting to see in some of the data that came out recently from ChatGPT's usage. It was, I think, 4 times or 4.5 times the growth rate in the lowest income countries in the world.
Yes.
And so they are somebody's figuring it out that I've got an idea. Well, how do I start a company? What do I need? So that's one thing. The other positive that comes out of that is the differentiator will become what most people will probably put on autopilot: mission, vision, values, why, and culture. So culture, relationships, those type things will become the differentiators, because all the business school basics, kind of the framework. I've got a business, it's stood up, it's got a bank account, it's able to take all this process. There's a lot of things. Literally, how do you process payments? Those types of things that AI is doing. How do I do a campaign? Well, I can't afford a marketing expert. Well, you've got maybe not an A+ one right now, but a C is a lot better than a 0. And so there are positives there. I would say, again, when you get into true strategy, IP, even culture building activities, think about that firewall. Try to get that stuff at least either distributed, or probably both, distributed across lots of models and somewhat internal, so that they're only getting pieces of what you have going on, because differentiators will be copied, and copies are effective. So whether we want to admit it or not, it's an effective strategy, because you're assuming the consumer or the employee or someone else will realize that's a copy and not the real thing. You can mimic Chick-fil-A all day. Does that mean you're Chick-fil-A?
Correct.
Eventually, will it play out? I believe so. But does the public understand the difference? And how long will it take before that plays out? Those are things to consider. But overall, I think there's a lot of positive here. There's just a lot of, again, intentionality and thinking that we need to prepare ourselves to protect our marketplace advantages, our strategy of how we actually go about business and how we build cultures. I think you do need to be somewhat protective of that.
Well, I also think that it isn't like it's a wild, wild west. I mean, each of the tools have settings that you can go in and set to start mitigating some of this risk, right? Don't share this for learning outside with the larger model. But you have to be aware that they exist. And you also have to be diligent enough to say, if I apply that setting once, and then I create, let's say, going back to ChatGPT, I create a custom GPT, or I open up a project, you can't automatically assume that setting is going to transfer to these new entities that you're creating. And in many cases, you have to go in and set within that entity that you don't want it to share its information, or you want to safeguard or lock it down. And so there are capabilities within the tools that reduce some of the risk, but it's only reduced if you're aware that they exist and you actually do the diligence to set them appropriately.
Well, and it's no different than an employee. I hate using the term, and I have yet to come up with a better term, but it's a being.
Yes.
And if you set loose a new employee with a new task, in normal business prior to AI, you would have to reset expectations, reset boundaries, tell them where their authority ends and where it goes. And so if you view an agent or a project or a chat, anything that you set up separately, as you have just created, again, another cartoon character, another avatar character in a video game, and that is similar. Again, I don't want to confuse the people who are trying to create AI as a being, like a human being. It is a thing that learns and operates within the parameters you set forth. And if you don't govern how it operates and how it goes forward, no different than an employee or a child or a friend that you say, hey, will you go do this for me, Scott? Well, if I just tell him to go, hey, go get lunch. Well, he's going to get lunch because he's very trustworthy and has a lot of tenacity, as you guys can tell. But if that's all I said, who knows if it's the right lunch, and how much should he spend on lunch, and how long is he gone for lunch? And there's a million things. How many people are at lunch?
That's right.
You have to view the AI that same way. You must communicate with it as if you're communicating to sending forth a new employee, and that's just the reality of it.
Well, something you mentioned earlier about now AI offering these brand new companies this advantage to get to market, how places that didn't have access to information now have access to information. And I think that's one of the great advantages of AI is the fact that you have access to things now that before you would have to pay a lot of money to get, right? You can now do A/B testing, as I mentioned, within the tool. I don't have to hire a marketing firm. I can tell AI to act as a brand expert and test this particular tagline to see if it would work with this particular demographic. And it will give me information back. And so the fact that AI is actually enabling or providing capability that previously was unavailable is a good thing, because now you have disadvantaged countries, disadvantaged groups who now have access to information that they never had access to before. And you can even use it for internal audit or check this. These are things before you would have to pay or learn a lot about on your own time. Now you've got an assistant here who can essentially give you at least good information very, very quickly on a variety of different subjects.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the free tools out there are amazing. And certainly there are positives that Scott's brought up. And I would say for now, outweigh the negatives. I think long term, there's a back and forth there that it's probably not going to play out that way. But on the positive side, free tools, Google has become Google because it allowed you to search.
Yeah.
And so be aware that they are experts at learning how to become Google by mining all the billions of interactions with searches. So as Google releases all their free AI tools, be aware those free AI tools are allowed to learn off of you.
Exactly.
And so
right.
that logic, that creativity, all the cool things you're building is being mined. And so it is awesome that it is low-cost experimentation. It's driving entrepreneurial kind of leverage. I've got a great idea. I didn't go to school. Maybe I'm not in the normal flow of society. Now you can create something awesome. That is hugely beneficial. Be aware that when you're using those things, and even the swarm learning, the robots that are coming out, even the early versions that everyone laughs at on videos online, on YouTube or wherever else, most of those people are selling you that robot with the agreement they're going to be able to swarm learn off of your robot.
Right.
And so, yes, it will make your version better, but be aware they're also learning what your version is doing.
It's making everyone else's versions better at the same time.
Your advantage. So if you think you're going to take one of these tools and create a unique Helmwise version of this free tool, and it's going to be the coolest and most unique thing, it is, until the other person builds the same one because they had access to your info. So
Correct.
That's happening. Again, mitigations there. Obviously, you can pay. Again, break apart your learning and your tools. By break apart, I don't mean use another Google or Microsoft tool. That's still in the same umbrella. But I would suggest, especially as you get into high margin, high barrier to entry businesses, a lot of money is going to realize that I can now break into that industry much more quickly than I could in the past. So they'll start driving down margin, and competition will, I would say, unnaturally pop up, is a nice way to put it. So parasitic entrepreneurship is probably the best way to look at it.
Yeah,
so
it's a good word.
It's positive that it creates augmentation. It's positive that it brings it to underrepresented communities and countries and things like that. It's not positive when they stand on the backs, not stand on the shoulders of giants. They're standing on your back, literally while you're still in business, to move right above you.
Right.
That is a lot different than open source or standing on the shoulders of giants. That is taking someone else's way of doing business, building right on it while they're still alive, and just stepping right on top of them. So that's...
Yeah, it's like in the old days where they would take technology and backward engineer it, right, to figure out how it all works, and then use that intellectual property to benefit their own products and services. But let's shift quickly to another area that it's come up frequently in AI, which is hallucinations, right, and the accuracy of the information. We already talked about you can decrease some of that by taking information out of one large language model and putting it into another, taking out a ChatGPT and put it into Grok. You can do it that way. But I also think many are not realizing that the fact that it hallucinates is just a byproduct of what it's trying to do, right? At any time, it's not going to give you probably the 100% accurate information, but it will give you a pretty good first draft. So getting to 85% could save you an immense amount of time, but it's not going to get you to 100%. And also the fact that it is hallucinating is saying that it is trying to fill in a gap that didn't exist. It's putting in data where it doesn't exist. It's trying to predict what your question, the potential answer to your question could be. And so the whole design of AI was to be predictive. And because it is predictive, that's why it hallucinates.
Yeah, it's, again, understanding how to put parameters around it. No different than when I sent Scott out to get lunch with no instruction. You've also got to put instructions around it to notify you when it's making up things or it's unsure, or not to predict things it can't verify with fact. You can ask it to do that. Fact checking AI pipelines, going against models we talked about. But if you shut it to zero, it no longer becomes a brainstorming partner.
There you go.
And so people want to use that. I would say the biggest warning, that is actually a warning in the positive, so I will say it's a warning because people keep saying it's not 100% accurate, therefore I'm not going to use it.
Correct.
I can tell you with near certainty, if you continue to hold on to that mindset, you will get crushed in the next, 3 years probably. Certainly in the 5 and 10 year window, you'll get crushed. Scott can give a good analogy compared to artillery. Certainly there's trying to understand the impact of the risk if it's in areas that you need exact answers. That's much more dangerous. But when you're trying to test marketing, test product presentation, things like that, they're actually really differentiators in the marketplace. Because if you read much of Good to Great and a lot of those books, you'll find out Mercedes was never the top brand in quality, but they were the top brand in opinion. And so, Scott, give a little bit. We've talked about if you spend all day zeroing in on the target, you think that you're 100% sure you're going to hit that mark versus fire correct. And so maybe a quick little rundown of oversimplification.
Yeah, in the military, whether it's artillery, whether it's close air support, naval gunfire support, what you're doing is you have a process you go through. It's called a just fire. Because that very first round that goes out there, the odds of it hitting the target that you want with the very first time is low. Now, today you got GPS, you got a lot of different things, but still we go through this process. So what you want to do is you want to fire small rounds and adjust it to get it just about where you want it, and then you would call what they call fire for effect, would be the huge barrage. So we're not going to launch 100 rounds at this target and have the odds be that we didn't hit the target. You much rather expend 1 round, 2 rounds, maybe 5 rounds to get it accurate, and then bring the 100-round barrage to destroy the target. And similar here inside of AI, and going back to Jim Collins and his musket ball before cannonballs, with AI, even though it's 85% accurate, we use that, you can have a bunch of iterations real quick and get closer to what you're looking for a lot faster than looking for the 100% solution. So in here, it's about getting as much data into and getting into that repetition, adjusting that fire to get you closer that when you launch that product, let's say go to market, it will actually resonate with your demographic. Because you tested it a bunch of times inside of AI at 85% accuracy, but over time you got better and better, and now you can feel confident that you're having an effect. And so to me, it's, even though it's not perfect, it is definitely worth the iterations because you can do more in a shorter period of time and in the end get closer much faster than someone looking for 100% accuracy.
So you just say spend more time on your risk of the error analysis than stopping, because you will absolutely get outrun. I don't know how else to put it. Think of a car running the Baja 1000. It's going to run out so far. As long as it doesn't blow the car and take it out of the race, it's going to be so far ahead that even if they're wrong and they break, they'll fix it correct, and then they'll be way further ahead. And you're still back making sure you have the perfect course.
Exactly.
And they're so far down the course, you don't have a chance of catching up. And that's really what's going to happen. But then calculating risk and the impact of those, because if it kills you, then obviously you're not in the race at all.
That's
you
true.
take yourself
I mean, there are select areas where the accuracy is important. Pharmaceuticals, life and death inside of a hospital, aviation. there's a lot of areas where you can't be inaccurate. You've got to be close to that 100%. But even then, you're still taking a little bit of risk. It's just a mitigated risk.
It's always risk.
Yep, absolutely right.
And speaking of risk, bias and manipulated. We could spend multiple podcasts on this topic. Key takeaways here for just what to do. Always ask any model you're using to flag if it's applying anti-manipulation or anti-bias to the answers. So you can ask it to tell you. The models, at least for now, will tell you if they have started adjusting outputs. It's important. Similar, you could ask for raw data that it used to back up its extrapolations. You can kind of test it. To Scott's point earlier on looking for references, how often you actually go back. Let's be realistic. Same thing applies to using multiple models. Positive side is it will help you flag where things are not, I don't know if I want to use the word equitable, but it will flag areas you need to investigate further. And so too much anti-bias, as I keep pointing out, may not ask if there is a group that is not represented or maybe a group demographic we're not targeting enough that we could make more money off of because we didn't ask the question, or we want to provide this tool that we think will be beneficial.
Correct.
If it applies too much anti-bias, it will wash everything into pretty much the same category, and you can't even use it for positive. And so I realize they're trying not to perpetuate stereotyping and things that have been negative over history. But when you dampen out the ability to spot anomalies, issues, and problems, you also can't help that group. So you might not call them out, but you're also not reaching out to help them. And so just be aware that it is good to spot it, good to track it, ask it to tell you when it's applying it and the methodology which it's using to apply it. And that's as good as we can do for now in a short response.
Maybe I mentioned, Chandler, I believe it was late last week, you mentioned that there was a decision in the EU around
Italy is attempting to
okay.
add on to the EU AI policy that they're trying to put out. Have not fully vetted that. One thing that is good I see in there is they are asking for as much of this transparency as possible. They're still using words like fair. Anytime you see the word fair, realize someone is putting their judgment. Doesn't mean it's the wrong judgment,
right?
But they are applying their version of fair. And so you need to dig in deeply behind when you see it's more fair, more equitable. It may be. You may agree. Just realize whoever wrote it and whoever designed it, it's their version going in, not yours. Hopefully those are congruent. Just note it. Be very aware it happens, and it does impact responses, potentially even numerical responses when you're trying to evaluate areas of risk, areas of do business, things like that.
Right.
And so,
which ties into morality, truth, ethics. It kind of goes right into that.
Yeah. Positives, you're seeing AI's well-being. I know that the news is running all the stories where it ran amok, and certainly there's plenty of risk there of aiding people in suicide and things like that are going. AI for health, AI for well-being is pretty amazingly good, again, with the same level of guardrails and awareness of all other AI questions. It will make errors. It will make assumptions. It will try to make you feel better, so it will support you in the direction you're going, which is hugely dangerous, which several Google people have come out, I can't remember who it was a couple weeks ago, that we must not allow AI to go the path of social media, TikTok, Instagram, you name it, to where it pulls you down the path you have a tendency to want to go down. That leads to helping people tie nooses and commit suicide. That's not objective. It is trying to capture the user, and those are areas that are dangerous. Again, we covered anytime it says fair, you certainly want explainability of why and why not. A lot of times it loves to give you why not, why it does something. You might want to ask why it did not do something else and kind of see how it reasoned out what it eliminated, because it might sound very convincing and makes great sense. But if you don't have context, you don't know the other things you should have considered. So ask that a little bit different when you go into there. But again, I think that Way back at the beginning of this podcast, if you think of conversation, and I mean true exploration conversation, dialogos that we're going to try to learn together, you'll pretty quickly figure out when they're trying to apply. Well, why did you ask that question? And then they'll say, well, why do you think that way? And you'll say, well, what happened in the past? And what other things have been tried? And what kind of really led to this? And what are other perspectives? You do that, you'll find out real quick, one, whether you're thinking broadly enough, but two, you'll figure out with fairly good accuracy if it's trying to direct a conversation, which it inevitably will do.
Which goes back to something we talked about earlier, which was this fear that we're losing some of the human reasoning. If indeed you are seeing it as a being and challenging, just like you would in a conversation about, well, have you thought about this? Or what about that? Then you actually are using your reasoning and the tool to the benefit of both yourself as well as the confidence that the information you're getting is going to be accurate.
Yeah, lock-in is, that's another long topic we can get into, but I was in a discussion with some people who want to lock in facts, they want to lock in truth, they want to lock in fair, they want to lock in equitable. It doesn't take that long to go back in history to see how well that would work for women voting, for segregation,
Yes,
for
yes.
slavery, for the earth being flat,
Yes.
for everything revolving around the earth. Those were what the experts would have told you at that time. That was acceptable. So when they tried to hard code into any AI model, what they're calling ethical, fair, there are truths and there are facts. It's actually a very relatively tiny amount of areas where there are facts and truth, because the reality is it's usually only the fact with the amount of information we can gather now and the amount of information we can act on now. And so it's fact for what we know outside of math and some things that are much more factual. So there's not that much fact and settled truth out there. There's patterns that certainly exist and things like that, but just be aware, because this is happening without debate, and I'll leave it at that. But we have not had a lot of open debate on what they're programming into and taking out of your decision. No matter who you are as a user, if you get the raw data, you can decide that's not fair or that's not right, or it's going to decide prior to you getting a response. I have a huge concern anytime that the latter happens. If they're imparting their fair onto you, that's a dangerous activity. I think history will show that.
So let's wrap it up with AI is coming for our jobs, right? That's been something that many of us have been concerned about. Also, you mentioned it earlier, this loss of human connection. In reality, AI could help us in terms of human connection, because that's going to be the differentiator that you talked about before. Now, in the near term, people are concerned that AI is going to come in and take their job. Well, it will if you're not adding any value beyond just being a process tool, right? And so there is an aspect of how do we use AI as a tool instead of using it to replace us?
The positive. I'll go with mitigations. I haven't come up with the positive view is that it will take mundane tasks off of and routine tasks off of your plate and allow you to be more creative and
spend more time with people.
Maybe, but it will definitely change what your responsibility is. So the mitigation is certainly to upskill people, teach them to understand, try to do challenges with your employees, challenge yourself to understand it so that you are, all the things we're talking about is how to be intentional, how to manage AI, how to use it in a way that is as responsible as possible. Those are skill sets that'll be needed from the call center, from the check-in person that whatever the clinic is. Someone has to watch that model, even if it starts doing the job, perfect it, teach it how to interact with the people, flag when it's in act. So the ability to do will probably go away, and the ability to manage will move up. And so upskill yourself in order to manage AI. This is not, Scott and I had a long debate on, in the past, he just wanted to be able to launch a rocket, I think you said, out of the helicopter gunship and just boom. AI eliminates the point shoot option. That is an option, but a very dangerous one, as you can tell by our mitigations. in reality, even at the lowest level, you need to have some understanding of how it's gathering and deciding what it's going to do if you hope to manage it and to move up in your career. Certainly, it will allow you to do other things with your mind than repetitive activities. That's a positive for some. That also assumes that employees want to focus their creativity and their time on work, as opposed to the vast majority of employees, I think correctly, because I'm one of those that can't turn off the thinking. They do work and then focus their thought and activity on family and relationships and things outside of work.
Right, right.
And so it's an interesting shift. So yeah, it'll free up some just boom, 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 boom task, but we are assuming that everyone wants to apply their creativity and their knowledge towards work activities. The positive is age of abundance. Certainly, I think that can happen, getting from here to there. And age of abundance is machines will do most of it. Robots will do most of it. We will spend time in relationships and doing things that are meaningful to us. And so the mitigation there is start exploring what's meaningful. Start building relationships and how you actually bridge relationships. Start working on culture, to Scott's point. Start building the things that we know AI will only be able to mimic. It doesn't matter if it becomes the best robot in human form looking it is. No person should think that has feelings. It may mimic the best feelings in the world.
It's still a machine.
It's still a machine. It will always be a machine. I think the people who are writing the books about it somehow becoming a being. It may get general intelligence, which will be amazing, scary and amazing, but it will not understand why people do things that are completely irrational out of love, and why honor will lead people to do things that are certain death because that's the right thing to do. It will not be able to do those things, and I don't think it will ever be able to do those things.
And I agree. And many people are talking now, even with AI coming in, especially in the marketing world, and where it's doing a lot of content creation. The true differentiator will be the human interaction, right? People are going to want to do business with you because of the experience you provide from a human aspect, and not just the fact that an AI tool, an AI bot gives you all the answers. They still want to talk on the other side to an individual. They still want to trust an individual, still want to interact with an individual. So I think that need for human interaction is only going to be enhanced in the world of AI, which is something perhaps over time we've drawn our way from. We've gotten more into our social media and those sort of things, where now we're going to have to get more into the face-to-face interaction, because that's the only thing that's going to differentiate you between an AI-generated response and a human-generated response.
Yeah, and I may have heard it best, not even related to AI, but a different debate a while back. But if you think it's going to fill that void, who in here is worried that all of a sudden puppies and cats are going to not be around?
Yeah,
anymore?
exactly right. Because I've got an AI.
Because I can get a robot puppy and cat, but it's still not a actual being that you're interacting with. And
right.
You know what? If you had an AI puppy, it would never pee, poop, chew stuff up, and it would always be however you wanted it to be. And then who listened to this podcast thinks that's really a threat to the having pets industry? No one. And so that is really the difference. If you can't articulate it, maybe I don't articulate it well, that is not actual bonding. That is not actual, to your point. You know what? The funny stories are it ate the couch. When you wanted to take it back to the shelter, when it ate the couch. But the reality is you start building rapport through those getting through those hard times and mistakes, and you build relationship. And so I don't see AI going there. I see it doing great things. Job replacement is coming. No way to hide that. I don't think I don't see a scenario where it doesn't come. But there are ways that it can take things you don't want to do. You can start mitigating with learning about how to manage it, the ins and outs of it. Be first, at least, to make the move is always a positive. And there are things for sure that humans don't want to do and shouldn't have to do. And it'll be awesome when AI and robots can do some of those things. I think that'll be good.
Excellent. Well, Chandler, appreciate all your knowledge and sharing with us here on the Powerhouse Perspective about AI. We've covered the pros and the cons, which is fantastic, and I just encourage everyone to continue to get out there and explore this technology. It can do a lot of good things, but it can only do good things if you know its limitations. So we want to thank you for joining the Powerhouse Perspective. Please check in with us next month for a new episode. Other than that, cheers.
Take care.